Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Imperial. This segment's being brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where entrepreneurs and professionals publish to grow their businesses and to leave a legacy. We're joining us today. We're having a special spotlight on businesses across the country and even in your town. Joining me is Dr. Steve Taubman, and he's the founder of the anxietydoc.net and the ouchdoctors.com, serving everyone online. Dr. Steve, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Great pleasure.
Dr. Steve, tell us a little bit about your practice and the folks you specifically help.
Sure, Mark. Well, for a number of years, I've been known as a professional development, personal development guy, speaking primarily in the area of mindfulness and its practical application for being more successful. Spoken on stages all over the world. Most recently, with the pandemic having hit us, we realized a couple things. First of all, I can't be out on the road very much. And secondly, that there's a resurgence or an uptick in many ways of two things in particular, one being chronic pain and the other being anxiety. They're both just through the roof, as many of your viewers, I'm sure, know. And so I developed a program based on the work that I do, which is essentially in the areas of mindset management. That means hypnosis, mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy, and a compendium of things that help people without drugs, without surgery, without other kinds of intervention, to find that place inside of themselves where they can let go of and overcome various kinds of maladies like chronic pain, meaning fibromyalgia, arthritis, things of that sort, as well as anxiety, so they can put that aside and live their lives more happily.
Yeah, now to your point, a lot of folks don't really totally understand what's going on with their bodies or what they're doing. And there must be a lot of misconceptions about your work. Can you speak to those and talk about one or two things that people commonly mistake?
Well, sure. And particularly in the work that I do with my partner, Tim Warren, the Ouch Doctors, we find that those who are suffering chronic pain have for a long time bought into the medical model, which is if this drug doesn't work, the solution is maybe another drug or another or another. And sometimes they end up with one drug that's meant to combat the side effects of the previous drug. And the next thing you know, they're overcome by these things. The entire premise is wrong. It's all based on the concept of treating the symptoms rather than the underlying cause. And when it comes to chronic, long-standing pain, the myth is that there's nothing that can be done. But the reality is that the patterns that reinitiate the pain happen all inside of our brains. Now, that's not to say the pain's all in your head. It's a different kind of a model. What we're saying is that your nervous system develops pathways, and those pathways start to become the dominant or default pathways, the same way as if you you walk the same path through the woods over and over again, eventually there'd be a path there, and that would become the path of least resistance. Well, we do the same thing with pain in our bodies and in our brains, and then we have no ability to break through it. But in fact, we know through certain specific neurological exercises, including deliberate thought patterns, including mindfulness patterns. In other words, learning how to become very focused on a particular point of focus, that we can eliminate pain regardless of the diagnosis that's been given. So that's a big misconception a lot of people live with, is I've got a problem, my doctor told me the diagnosis, and because now I know the name of it, it therefore can't be helped.
Dr. Taubman, so a lot of folks out there probably struggling with their issues for a long time and have gone down many different paths. How do you help them discover what the challenge is? What is it like working with you? What is the first thing you do?
Well, I think what I'd like to say is that the work that I do and the work that Dr. Tim does as well is designed to really get to know the individual first and foremost, because you're not a diagnosis, you're not a bunch of symptoms on a list, but you are a unique individual with particular patterns that you've developed over time. And so the very first visit with somebody is a kind of getting to know you process. I want to see what's triggering your pain or your anxiety. What makes it better? What makes it worse? What started it in the first place? What kinds of emotional patterns have developed habitually within you that you're then deflecting into the pain or the discomfort, emotional discomfort that you're feeling? And then we very quickly start getting into solution orientation, meaning I'm not here as a therapist to try to figure out whether your mother breastfed you or not. I want to get right to work. Here's the problem. So what? Now what? How are we going to fix this? And the work therefore becomes very fast, almost to the point of being magical, that we're able to take somebody and help them break a pattern that can dismantle an entire, kind of constellation of symptoms.
Right on. So, as you mentioned, we're in the midst of dealing with a pandemic and novel times. How has that affected your practice? What have you seen, and are the concerns people reach out to you for different now than they were before?
Their perceived issues are different. Now they think the problem is COVID, or politics, or there's the trigger, the thing that stimulates the feeling of anxiety or the chronic pain is different, because we're all suffering from a common, the common enemy, so to speak. But in reality, when we dig just a little bit deeper, we find out that it's none of those things. Those are just the triggers. And it's important to make a distinction between the thing that triggers the feeling versus the patterns that exist inside of you that make that the thing that happens when that trigger occurs.
Dr. Taubman, how did you get started? What inspired you to begin your work?
Well, like most people who are passionate about what they do, it started with me learning about what I needed to learn for me. I grew up with anxiety. I grew up with depression. I grew up with self-esteem issues, and I made a study over many years of what do we know about the mind? What do we know about the brain? So everything from neurology and neuropsychology all the way to mindfulness and, as I said, hypnosis, beginning to understand that there are tools that we can use, and that it's important to understand when it's time to treat the body, when it's time to treat the mind, and how do we work with those together. So my passion started with my own personal need to find answers, and then it became clear to me that this was my mission.
Before I ask you my last question, is there anything that I didn't think to ask you that you think is important that you'd like to share with my audience today?
Well, I always like to remind everybody that what feels like a permanent and insolvable problem is almost always something that can be solved when it's seen from a different perspective or from the outside. But we get so caught up in believing what we've been told or what we've come to believe. And so I always like to remind everybody that I speak to, whether I'm on a big stage in front of 10,000 people or one-on-one, is don't believe everything you think.
That's sage advice. Dr. Taubman, for folks listening right now that would like to connect with you, how do they find you and connect online?
Well, if you're interested in doing any of the kind of work that we're currently doing, the physical and emotional work one-on-one, being coached through these modalities, either go to theanxietydoc.net, that's theanxietydoc.net, and you'll learn more about the anxiety process. And you can schedule an appointment to have a complimentary session with me one-on-one, just to begin to see if this is the right thing for you. If you're interested in doing some more work in the area of chronic pain, you could go to theouchdoctors.com and you'll learn more about myself and Dr. Tim. Again, there you can schedule a time to have a visit with us, or take a look at our brand new program, which is the Pain Switch. And if you go to getthepainswitch.com, you'll have access to that kind of a do-it-yourself pain program.
This has been terrific, Dr. Steve. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with my audience today. I wish you continued success for you and for all of your clients.
Thanks so much, Mark.
This segment's been brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com, celebrating the release of post-pandemic profits, available now in Amazon, Kindle, and other great booksellers. That's all for now. Join me next time on my next Expert Spotlight, and I'm Mark Imperial.